Okay, so hopefully you see on your screen a slide that says Asclepius Part 1. What is the Horizon Europe Twinning 2026 called? Okay, in this first part, these are the things that I hope to cover. So I'm going to start off by giving just a couple of examples of twinning projects. I'll then go on to talk about what is the context of twinning within the European Commission's Horizon Europe. I'll talk about some basics, budget, and strategic objectives of the twinning call. I'll then go on to talk about what the Commission expects in terms of the consortium, the widening countries, and the scientific scope for twinning, what the Commission expects in terms of capacity building, mobility, and inclusiveness within your twinning proposal. I'll say some words about what the Commission expects in terms of impact, synergies, and evaluation. And yes, for any of those, that first part of the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And at the end of that section, I'll go through and review them. Okay, let's start off with some examples. And what I have to emphasize here is over the last 5, 6 or more years, there's been literally hundreds of twinning projects funded by the European Commission under Horizon Europe. Here on my slide, I'm just highlighting two. These are two that I've been involved with. Uh, the first one, as an example, is called SUSNano. Next to it, you can see a map. It's a map of Albania. And this is a twinning project that was submitted to a twinning call back in 2021. And I did it with the University of Tirana. And in their consortium, they had a partner from Spain, ICN2, and a very good university from the Czech Republic, Pulaski University. And their twinning project is all focused on the development of sustainable nanosensors for water pollution detection. So this project, it's been running for the past few years. And in fact, it will be ending at the end of this February. So it's very, very close to completion. But that project I was particularly proud of at the time because it was one of the first ever twinning projects, one in Albania. Then the other example, you see more in the middle of the screen, it was called TWISMA. This is a twinning project with the Institution of Scintillating Materials in Kharkiv in Ukraine. And their project, which just ended at the end of December, it was also funded under a call. I think it was at the start of 2022. In their consortium, they've had CERN in Geneva and a very good CNRS Institute in Lyon. And they've been working on the development of innovative calorimeters, particle detection systems, essentially for high energy physics. Now, these two examples, it's coincidence. Well, it isn't coincidence they're somehow related to materials. But what I want to stress is the twinning scheme is open to any field of research and development. And if you're interested to find out about others, on the right of my slide, you'll see these three QR codes. Now, if you were to go on those, you can find lists of all the other projects, all the other twinning projects that have been funded under previous calls under Horizon Europe. And I strongly recommend you, if you have an interest in this call, to go and investigate because there's been plenty of twinning projects relating to, say, healthcare, or artificial intelligence or engineering, all sorts, yes? So let's move on now and talk a bit about the context of the twinning call. So the twinning call is part of the Horizon Europe Widening Work Programme 2026 to 2027. On the right of this slide, you can see the cover page of that widening work program. And the QR code just to the top right of it, that will take you directly to the PDF file with that work program. So if you don't have it yet, I strongly recommend you download that work program. Um, Now, the words widening, or they call it the widening program. Well, widening is short for widening participation and strengthening the European research area. And the objective of widening in the Commission's terminology is about closing research and innovation gaps across the EU. If I was to put it into my own words, I would say widening is essentially a scheme aimed at not only European member states, but predominantly European member states, say in Eastern and Central Europe, but also Greece, also Portugal, where for various reasons their research innovation systems are perhaps weaker than other parts of Western Europe. But widening is not only limited to European member states, it also encompasses countries on the borders of Europe. So, for example, Georgia is eligible to apply to widening. Armenia, Ukraine, Morocco, Serbia. There's later on you'll see a slide which shows all the other countries that are also eligible for this scheme. Some basic facts about Twinning Call. So this 2026 call, it has a specific call identifier. And this long text string that you see here on near the top line, Horizon Wide Era 2026-02 Widening 01, that's the specific call identifier for twinning. Twinning is what the Commission calls a coordination support action with lump sum funding. I'll go what those terms exactly mean. I'll go into in more detail later on in my slides. The call itself was officially opened last week on the 8th of January. This means that it's already possible to go onto the European Commission's what is called they have a specific web portal called the Funding and Tenders portal. You can now go on there and you can register online for the call since last week. And the call deadline is the 9th of April, 5 p.m. Brussels time. The duration of these twinning projects is up to 3 years, in typically 3 years. And as I've already mentioned before, it's what they call a bottom-up call. So it means it's open to all fields of science and technology, provided, of course, that it's state of the art. Some words about budget and expected contribution. So the indicative EU contribution per project, in simpler words, the grant available for each project can be anywhere between 800,000 euros and 1.5 million euros. The Commission says that different budget requests are not excluded if they're well justified. But here I'm adding my own words. I would stick to, if you're doing a proposal, stick to a budget within this budget range. And in fact, don't be afraid to request up to 1.5 million euros, provided you have sufficient activities in your project to justify that. The total indicative budget for the topic for this call is 264.5 million euros. And altogether, the Commission are anticipating to fund something like 210 projects from this call. So there's going to be a lot of new twinning projects resulting from this latest call. The strategic objective of twinning. So it's about enhancing networking between research institutions in widening countries and together with leading EU institutions. It's about raising research excellence and innovation capacity in a defined area, defined research area. It's about strengthening research management capacity of the coordinating institution. In terms of expected outcomes, which is a sort of synonym in this case for impact. So what I'm showing you here has come from the call text in that widening program. So the Commission are saying that they expect the outcomes from twinning projects to include improved research excellence and capacities in the widening countries, reduced research and innovation gap within the EU, enhanced strategic collaboration with at least two leading institutions from two different member states slash associated countries. They also expect the outcomes to include raised reputation and attractiveness of the coordinating institution, improved research profile of staff from that coordinating institution, including mobility and skills, and strengthen research management capacity and structures within the coordinating institution from the widening country. In terms of the composition of a consortium, the Commission is saying that, yes, the coordinating institution for the proposal has to be either a public research institute or university in a widening country, and that there need to be at least two internationally leading partners from two different member states slash associated countries. So just to be clear, associated countries, this means associated countries to Horizon Europe. It's optional to have additional partners if they're relevant. So you might, for example, include in your consortium a partner that's specialized, say, in training, communication, knowledge valorization, and/or intellectual property rights. This is a more or less full list of widening countries. So all the countries you got listed here, they can coordinate, they can submit a twinning proposal. So yes, as EU, it's predominantly Central Eastern European countries, but there's also Portugal and Greece features in that list. And then countries associated to Horizon Europe, the list is also quite extensive. And yes, you see, of course, Georgia's mentioned there, Ukraine, Armenia, Tunisia. I think even Egypt has recently joined. The scope and scientific strategy. So the Commission say for your proposal, it's important that you clearly define the area of research and innovation targeted by your twinning project proposal. It's vital that you demonstrate the scientific excellence of all partners in the chosen area. So you, the coordinating institution, you already need to have expertise in the given scientific field, which can be demonstrated from, say, research publications, research presentations at conferences. Not only the coordinating institution, of course, but also your advanced partners. They need to be clearly excellent in the given scientific field. And the Commission expect that within your proposal that you explain how this twinning project will take research and innovation to a new level, in other words, beyond state of the art. In terms of network and capacity building activities. So what you see with these bullet points, these are activities which will be funded if you win a twinning project. So a twinning project allows you to do short-term staff exchanges and expert visits. It says here inward and outwards. So in other words, for example, in the case of ASCLEPIUS, Eliever Institution, they're able to send their experts to the twinning partners in France at INRE and also to Portugal at the University of Minas in Braga. But equally, they're able to receive researchers from those two institutions who can come and are funded to come to Tbilisi. So there's staff exchanges, but also short-term on-site or virtual trainings, workshops, joint summer schools are funded. The attendance at conference and organization of joint events is funded. Dissemination and outreach activities to raise visibility are also funded activities. With all Horizon Europe projects, gender equality and inclusiveness are an important aspect. So in the case of your twinning proposal, it's important that your activities that you describe, that they align with the gender equality plans of the participating institutions. So not only the coordinating institution, but also the advanced partners. It's important that you promote increased gender equality and inclusiveness in all project activities, and it's important that you track and report on the participation of female scientists and any other underrepresented groups. Um, Part of this twinning project, not the whole of it, but certainly a significant component, needs to be dedicated to capacity building in research management. So the Commission say that for this, there needs to be either a dedicated work package or tasks where you describe how to go about strengthening research management in your coordinating institution. Um, to help you, how to say, help define what those kind of activities might be, the Commission recommends that you refer to something called the Research Management Roadmap / European Competence Framework for Research Managers. So it's worth going to have a look at those documents and using that as a reference to help define the activities that you will have in your project. And Eric, the aim of this capacity building is obviously about establishing or upgrading a dedicated research management support team for the coordinating institution. Another important feature of twinning projects is you're allowed to have what the Commission is referring to as a sort of research and innovation component. And they say if you have this, it needs to be work package one. So the Commission says it's optional, this research and innovation component. And if you have it, it mustn't, in terms of budget, it mustn't exceed 30% of the total Horizon Europe grant. So roughly speaking, so in other words, if you had a twinning proposal with a total budget of 1.5 million euros, then this work package one, the total budget for it across all the consortium partners mustn't exceed 450,000 euros. Yeah, so Richard says this work package one has to be entitled research components. It can't exceed 30%, but then in addition, the commissioners say that at least 50% of this component's budget must be allocated to the coordinator. So, for example, if you had a work package, if you had a proposal with a total budget of 1.5 million euros and 450 or just slightly below 450 has been allocated for work package one, then at least half of that, in other words, at least 225,000 euros, would have to be allocated to the coordinator. In this work package one, the Commission are rather relatively broad in what you can do. They say it can include the development and implementation of new ideas, methods, or technologies. I think in essence, for most twinning projects, what the coordinator and the advanced partners do is they define a scientific project, a state-of-the-art scientific project between themselves, and which can run for the 3-year duration of the project. And in fact, this slide is kind of repeating what I just said. So the activities in this research and innovation component, they must advance the state of the art in a chosen field. If there's any training directly related to advanced research and innovation, it should be budgeted here. This component should be used to build a strong scientific foundation for the long-term collaboration. I mean, in fact, what you'll see, and when I get into the second part of this training presentation, I very much recommend that this work package one helps define the overall proposal, the overall structure for your proposal, and defines and drives the activities, the exchanges that you have with your partners. With all Horizon Europe projects, the Commission are interested to know about what the impact would be, both in a sort of qualitative sense, but also in a quantitative sense. So it's important to have what they call impact indicators. These quantitative and qualitative indicators are usually at an institutional level, but you might also want to include in your proposal some reference to regional, national level. Um, the sorts of things that the Commission are interested to see as indicators would be things like research publications, citations, peer recognition, collaboration agreements with non-academic sector, to name just a few. But other indicators might be, for example, especially if you have a project which is innovation related, it might lead to the attraction of private investment. It might lead to intellectual property being created, for example, patents. It might lead to the initial development of some innovative products, services. And also the project might lead to the attraction of international students. This slide is somehow somewhat repetitive of what appeared earlier on, but it's good to emphasize. So these projects fund mobility and human capital development, so increase mobility inwards and outwards of qualified scientists and young researchers. Um, these 20 projects present a very good opportunity for doctoral candidates and early career researchers. And certainly in the 20 projects that I've been involved in, um, they've been an excellent opportunity for young researchers to do much of their research for a PhD. And that's in fact often been one of the most satisfying um, results that come out of these projects, seeing young researchers complete the project and it leading on to them successfully completing their doctoral studies. Some with all Horizon Europe projects, the Commission always has some sort of policy background, some sort of context. And in the case of widening and twinning, there's at least three sort of policy documents that it's good to be aware of and good to reference at some point in section 2 impact of your twinning proposal. So the first of these is a policy document, second era policy agenda from 2025 to 2027. This is a 3-year roadmap for enhancing Europe's research and innovation ecosystem. Oh, by the way, on the right of this slide, you see 3 QR codes. Each of those QR codes takes you to a website where you can get more information about these policy documents. So yeah, there's the first one. The second one, 2024-2029 political guidelines. This is a very broad document about the Commission's policies covering everything from defense and security to sustainable prosperity, democracy and social fairness. And then thirdly, there's what's called the competitiveness compass, the European Commission's roadmap for restoring Europe's dynamism and boosting economic growth. As I say, QR codes, they'll take you to websites where you can get more information about those. With twinning and widening in general, when you're writing these proposals, the evaluators and the Commission are always interested to hear if somehow this twinning project has some synergies with other funding that's going on in your institution, in your group. So, for example, and what I show here is just these 4 bullet points are just some examples. If, for example, your research institute or university is benefiting from EU cohesion policy funds, or your national government or regional government has some sort of smart specialization strategies, or there are national regional programs or private sector investment. If any of those are a source of funding for your university, for your research institute, it's really a good idea to mention that in your proposal in the impact section and show how somehow this twinning project helps to benefit from that or somehow is synergistic with that. Some brief words about evaluation and ranking. So yes, the deadline for the call is the 9th of April. The Commission gives themselves up to about a maximum of 5 months to complete the evaluation of all the proposals and to report back to all the submitters what their scores are. Now, each proposal is evaluated by at least 4 expert evaluators against the following 3 criteria. So there's excellence, impact, quality and efficiency of the implementation. Now, these 3 criteria, they also happen to be the titles of the subsections of the Part B, that this is the technical proposal that you'll be submitting for your twinning application. So you get scored for each of those. The scores for each criterion are out of 5. And so there'll be at least 4 expert evaluators, and they won't all score exactly the same. Of course not, because people are different. What the commission will do is they'll take the median, not the mean, but the median for each of those criterion, and then add them up, the 3 different criteria, and that will be the overall score. What's obviously the related question is, what's the score you need to get in order to get funding? Well, the honest answer is it all depends. It all depends on the number of proposals that get submitted. It all depends on the quality and the competitiveness of them. As a very, very rough guide, and things could be different in the future with this latest call, but I believe when we had the last twinning call in 2023, I believe there were proposals with scores of sort of 13 out of 15 that managed to get funding, but not all of them got with 13 out of 15 got funding. The issue is the commissioning has a certain budget for the call, and once they've completed the evaluation, they rank them that, so the proposal with the highest score, maybe 15, 14.5, who knows, will be at the top, running in descending order. And the commission will start funding from, with the top one, and they'll keep running down the list until they run out of budget. So where that cutoff point, it really depends. But as a rough guide, yeah, I think it was about 13 out of 15 was where the budget ran out last time. This call, there's more budget, but I think there'll be a lot more applicants. So I guess 13 might be also the cutoff point again. This last bullet point here, it says ex aequo proposals prioritized first by geographical diversity of coordinators among widening countries. So to try to explain it in simpler terms, if there are 2 proposals with exactly the same, 2 or more proposals with exactly the same score for excellence, impact, quality, the commission will favor the proposal from a widening country which has the lower number of twinning projects. Yeah, so the idea here is to give as much chance for as many widening countries to have twinning projects. So some key messages for applicants. If you're going to submit to this, if you're going to have a competitive proposal, it's vital that you build a strong complementary consortium centered on a widening country coordinator. It's vital that you present a clear strategy for excellence, capacity building, and management strengthening. It's vital you design a coherent set of networking, research, and innovation activities with measurable impacts. And it's vital that you align with Horizon Europe rules, lump sum budget logic, and twinning specific conditions. So that completes the part 1 of my presentation. Let me stop sharing. So that's a relatively rapid overview about the call. In part 2, I'm going to go into about how to write a competitive proposal. But I just want to say, does anybody have any questions already at this stage regarding the twinning call? If so, you're very welcome to raise those questions now, or otherwise, please put them in the chat. There'll also be a question and answer session at the very end of my part two.
May I ask one question?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
certainly. Please do.
Thank you. Thank you. Very useful and interesting presentation. I represent social and political science, and my question is there any balance between the STEM science and more social, political, humanitarian sciences? Because as I see, mostly project reflected STEM, science, technology, engineering, so on, are mostly funding. And what about social, political science?
Okay, it's a very good question. Thank you for the question. I have to be honest, I don't know what percentage of projects, 20 projects are, say, STEM, and what percentage are sort of from social sciences. Um, I don't know those figures offhand. I don't think the Commission enters this sort of scheme saying, oh, it'll be 90% this and 10% that, or it all depends. Are there projects, have there been projects funded under the Twinning scheme focused on social sciences? Absolutely, for sure there have. I'm sorry that I don't know the numbers or give you specific examples, but what I would suggest is, what I invite you to do, in one of the earlier slides that I showed, I had these QR codes where I said, look, this is where you can go and find out about all the other twinning projects that have been funded under Horizon Europe. If you go to those, you can do searches on keywords relating to social sciences, and I'm sure you'll uh, find examples. So it's a rather long, wordy response to you, but the short message, you can certainly apply. The key thing, whether it's STEM or social sciences, is you need to really make a strong argument and strong demonstration that this is what you're doing is state of the art in whatever scientific field. Yeah, that's what they really, really want to hear, and obviously that it aligns well with some of our European Commission priorities.
Why I ask this? Because there are some science, maybe peace study. We cannot calculate what kind of impact they have today, but they may have impact after some times. So it's sometimes maybe minus for our project. How do you think? Because
Well,
it's very difficult to find like measure of impact in political
yeah,
science, in social science sometimes. And there is mostly what kind of research we have. It's very interesting, very useful. It maybe have impact on great population, but this in fact is difficult to measure.
yes. I'm sort of hesitating a bit to answer your question. I was just thinking, I mean, I'll be honest with you, all the twinning proposals that I personally have been involved with over the years, they've all tended to be focused on STEM. But when I think about the actual indicators that we've given, they tended to be, and you'll see in my slides coming up later, they tended to be more sort of short-term indicators. It tended to be more things like, oh, this project will lead to so many new publications for the coordinating institution, or maybe they have ambition to file a patent or two patents. It tended to be relatively sort of short-term, and that seemed to be enough, at least in terms of sort of quantitative indicators.
Mhm.
So and let's be honest, even with STEM subjects, I mean, I've had one of the twinning projects we got that I managed to win last time for Ukraine. It's dealing with organic electronics,
Mhm.
but the it's all a bit looking at a crystal ball. I mean, hopefully they do well with the research, but even if it goes well, the impact on society is probably 10 years away. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even with STEM subjects, it's not so easy to, it's also rather speculative, what the long-term impact might be. Yeah. So don't, I guess I'm trying to say, don't be discouraged. Yeah. But do your investigation on past twinning projects. Try and find some good examples. All these twinning projects have their own project websites. And if you can identify a few relating to social sciences, hopefully on the websites you get some good information about what they've used, maybe in terms of indicators, work packages, and yeah.
Mhm. Okay, okay, okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Robert.
All right. I think maybe let me move on now to deal with the part two, because the part two, I'm afraid is somewhat longer. It probably takes about an hour. But at any time, if you have any questions, please go into the chat. Don't be afraid to write your question in the chat. And at the end of part two, I'll review any questions, um, and we'll proceed like that. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So, okay. So now we move on to part two, how to write a competitive twinning proposal. So look, in this section, um, the agenda is roughly the following. I'll start off by drawing your attention to some essential documents. I'll then say about how I recommend that you structure a twinning network. I'll then say about how to go about structuring the overall proposal, what I'm sort of calling an excellence implementation impact framework. I'll then go on to talk about what's called the Part B. So the Part B is the technical proposal. This is where you'll be spending most of your time and effort trying to prepare the proposal. And this Part B has these three sections. There's excellence, implementation, and impact. Um, I deliberately changed slightly the order that you may pick up that it says section one excellence, section three implementation, section two impact. Those section numbers is what you'll see in the part B. But in terms of sort of actual chronology, timing of a project, obviously the impact comes later. I'll then talk about a bit about the part A. This is the part of your application, which is where you have to fill in some online forms with administrative data, and you also have to upload your budget, your lump sum budget. I'll then direct you towards some other sources of information that you can find out about twinning. And lastly, if there's any questions from any of the audience, I'll take those questions at the end of the session. So let's start off some essential documents. So this is a rather busy slide. What I'm trying to show you here is three different documents. So the first one on the left, in fact, I've already shown before. This is the Horizon Europe Work Programme 2026-2027 for the Widening Programme. The QR code in the top left will take you directly to the PDF. So you absolutely must download that. And I would personally, what I tend to do is I print out the pages for the twinning call and I have them on my desk so I can easily read them. The next two documents, so the one in the middle, it says on the cover, Horizon Europe Programme Standard Application Form, in brackets HECSA. So this stands for Horizon Europe Coordination Support Action. This document is essentially the standard application form. It's the guidelines about how to go about writing the Part B, the technical part of your proposal. The document to the right of that, which you can only partially see, this is the European Commission's lump sum budget Excel tool. So this is an Excel file. Now, the standard application form and the lump sum budget tool, my it's these from time to time these documents get updated by the Commission. And it's absolutely vital that you have the latest, the correct version when you're doing your application. So my recommendation here is in order to get these documents, I recommend that you go to the European, and it says here on the bottom, you go to the European Commission's Funding and Tenders webpage where it has details of the 2026 twinning call and you register for the call. Once you've registered for the call through their portal, you can download these two documents. That way, you are 100% certain you have the right versions. Um, and yeah, sorry, this European Commission's Funding and Tenders webpage where the twinning call is in the bottom right-hand corner, you see this QR code. That will take you there. The only thing to add is you need to be already registered for the European Commission's Funding and Tenders webpage. Um, so if you haven't done that, that'll be a step that you'll have to do beforehand before you can register for the call and download these documents. Okay, so those are three vital documents. Let's move on to talk about this question about the twinning network. So you're essentially asking yourself the question, who will be the advanced partners in your twinning network who are going to help to boost the research and innovation capacity of your organization in your chosen state-of-the-art research topic? To help you sort of frame this question, to answer this question, um, this is a sort of simple like figure that I've used in many twinning proposals. So the Commission says that the minimum requirement for the consortium is that there has to be the coordinating partner from the widening country, and there needs to be at least two advanced partners from other member states or associated countries. My personal recommendation is stick to two advanced partners, unless you have a very strong reason for having more. It just makes life easier if you limit the number of twinning partners. And in fact, if you limit the number, then you allows you to have a simple kind of figure like this in your proposal. So with this figure here, which I when I'm at the start, well, in the past when I've helped with twinning proposals, um, to help the coordinator sort of frame the question and have discussions with potential advanced partners, we've had this sort of figure on a PowerPoint slide. And then in the center where you've got the yellow bubble, the partners sort of agreed, well, what's the focus of the joint research? Um, and then according to that, they then sort of reviewed and sort of asked themselves, well, how do we complement each other? You know, what are our complementary expertise, complementary facilities? And the partners have gone about filling those out. And then in turn, that is then driven, what sort of training, what sort of knowledge exchange are we going to do between ourselves? So, so yeah, look, this is a figure I've used in numerous twinning proposals. We've used it right at the start during early discussions about forming a network. And then during the proposal preparation, this table has been sort of filled out, it's been iterated upon, it's been improved upon, and eventually it's even been included in section 3.2 of the part B. And later on in this slide, I'll show you a completed example. Now let's move on to talk about what I'm sort of calling the excellence implementation impact framework. So, and what you'll see in the next slide, and what I'm trying to do is to help give you an overview of what your proposal, your part B, is all about. So with this part B, you have your excellence implementation impact. In essence, in the excellent part, it's about breaking down the project's research and innovation strategy into a series of objectives, covering the types of activities that will be funded under twinning. So it'll be about this research and innovation components. It's about networking, raising research and innovation capacity, and strengthening research management capacity. Implementation is going to be about mapping each of these key objectives to their own specific work package. And then with the impacts, part of the impact section is going to be about explaining how the work packages will contribute to expected outcomes defined in the Widening work program. Well, that's all fine and good, a few bullet points, but what might that look like as a sort of figure? And this is something that I've kind of come up with. So it's a rather busy slide, um, but let me try to sort of talk through it. So on the slide, you essentially see three columns. There's a first column with excellence at the top. There's a middle column with number 3, implementation. And then there's a third column on the right, number 2, impact. I'll step through each of these columns. So firstly, with excellence, in that part B, the technical proposal, there's going to be a subsection called 1.1 where you have to define what the objectives are of your twinning proposal. Now, what I recommend you do here is to break up your proposal into essentially 5 main objectives. There'll be an objective 1. This is the conducting state-of-the-art research on your STEM subject or social science. There'll be an objective 2 about the transfer of knowledge between senior researchers from across the consortium. There'll be an objective 3 about providing training to the young researchers, the PhD candidates. There'll be an objective 4, which is about strengthening the coordinator's research management capacities and administrative skills. And an objective 5, raising the coordinator's research profile. So yeah, this in the section 1.1, and we'll talk about it more in a few slides time. Section 1.1 has a 2-page limit. So very kind of briefly, in those 2 pages, you're going to define the titles of these 5 objectives and say just a few words, maybe, basically less than half a page for each of them. At this point, it can be in section 1.1, you're limited to 2 pages, but don't worry because there's a section 1.2 where you have a larger page limit and you can elaborate more on those objectives. So, okay, we define these 5 objectives. The thing to do here then in the middle column, implementation, is to have each of those objectives map onto their own work package. So objective 1 maps to work package 1, that's where it will be implemented. Objective 2, that objective will be achieved through implementing work package 2 and so on and so forth. And just to add, at the bottom of this middle column, implementation, at the very bottom, you see it says work package 6, project management. I know in many cases with Horizon Europe proposals, I often see consortia where they put project management as work package 1. I mean, this is my personal, I don't want to say hang up, but I always push the work package on project management to the very end, simply because it then allows me to have this mapping between the objective numbers and the work package numbers. So objective 1 can map to work package 1 and so forth. If I had project management right at the start, it would mess up this numbering sequence. So that's the middle column, and then on the right hand side we have impact. So for each of those work packages, you can think about and define different types of performance indicators. In the case of work package 1 about the research component, it'll be things like research papers, maybe patents, maybe collaboration agreements. Of course, it all depends on the nature of the scientific field you're working in. Work package 2, which is about the exchange of the senior researchers from across the consortium. Well, the types of performance indicators would be things like, well, the number of months of exchanges that take place each year or over the course of the 3-year project. It might be the number of workshops or seminars that are held, So those are just some examples. But this figure, hopefully, it helps you give you a bit of perspective on what you're trying to do with your proposal. What I'm going to do now is to move on about the part B. So this is the technical proposal. This is where you'll be spending the vast majority of your time and effort. On this slide, it shows you the titles and subtitles for the different sections. It also shows then in red font what the Commission recommends for the length for those different subsections. So overall, this part B has a page limit of 33 pages. And the Commission recommends, if we start off with excellence, so excellence has these subsections 1.1 objectives. The Commission recommends 2 pages. For section 1.2, coordination and or support measures and methodology, they recommend 6 pages. I'm not going to read out each of the subtitles and the recommended lengths. I mean, they're here that you can come back and look at those and refer to those. What I would like to say is, and I've highlighted it in sort of bright yellow at the bottom, as best you can, try not to deviate by more than half the 1 page from the recommended limits. From my experience, um, working with consortia, the section which scientists usually find the hardest to write is section 2, impact. Conversely, and as a consequence of this, they often, this impact section, the Commission is recommending in total 4 plus 5 pages, so 9 pages. I often see scientists struggle to write the 9 pages. They end up writing less, but conversely, for say section 3, which is about where you describe the work packages, they write too much. They don't write concisely enough, and they exceed. This section 3 is recommended altogether something like 16 pages, and they end up writing far more. You need to be very disciplined with yourself. Yeah, you need to make sure that that section 3 doesn't exceed 16 pages, and as close as possible the impact section that you get 9 pages written in there. Yeah. If anything, with these proposals, 33 pages is actually quite a, if you really to get all this information in, it's quite a struggle. So one of the things you can do, I know people less experienced with writing these proposals, they tend to think, oh, the front page is just a cover page with the title. No, even the page 1 where you've got the cover, you can start writing section 1.1 on that. So that will help you at least gain, so to speak, a page. Okay, we'll move on now to talk. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to step through these 3 sections: excellence, implementation, impact. I'm not going to talk exhaustively about what is required for each of those. But what I will do is I'll flag at least 1 or 2 things you should think about, what you should write about, and how you can go about writing them, or some figure that you can include. So, yes, starting with section 1, excellence. In this section, you've got a subsection called 1.1 objectives. One of the things you need to write about is you need to demonstrate the proposal's relevance to the work program. There's also a section 1.2, coordination and or support measures and methodology. Here, amongst the things you need to write about is why the research is important from a national and EU perspective. It's good to include what's called a SWOT analysis, and it's good if you can specify some scientific targets for the state-of-the-art research project that you have. So I'm going each of those specific points, I'm going to try to give some concrete example. So firstly, this thing, section 1.1 objectives, and demonstrating that your proposal is relevant to the call. So a common thing I do in these part Bs is I include some tables. And this is an example. This is part of a table from a twinning proposal I did for the call way back in 2021, so almost 5 years ago. Simple table. On the left-hand side, I I'd copied and pasted certain important key sentences from the call text, key requirements, and I put them in there on the left, and then very concisely on the right-hand side, the right-hand column, I identified how our proposal was addressing that. And you don't see it per se in this table because I obviously had to remove some specific details, but in that right-hand column, you don't have to write exhaustively, yeah, because you're often struggling with the space capacity, the space restraint. So don't be afraid to sort of say, oh, look, we've addressed this particular requirement. Go and see section 3.2, paragraph 1, or something like this. Yeah. So that's something, this is something you can include in section 1.1 of your proposal, and I recommend you do that. Um, in section 1.2, yeah, amongst the things you need to do is precisely describe why the research topic is important. I would recommend you limit that to maybe a half to 1 page in length. Um, try to do, when you're trying to explain why this research topic is important, remember uh, what I recommend is that you not only demonstrate this importance, say on a national level for your country or your region, but also on an EU level. So in terms of demonstrating why it's important at a national level, your country might have what are called smart specialization strategies. I have to be honest, I don't know if Georgia has this, but certainly many EU member states, they're with these smart specialization strategies, they're sort of yeah, policy, how would I say, they're they're research priorities that have been defined um, based on whether, how important these research topics are for the region, how they might have impacts, important impacts, maybe on a societal level, maybe on an economic level, this kind of thing. So it probably goes back, I'm guessing, probably more than 10 years ago when they first started doing these smart specialization strategies. But don't worry if you don't have that in Georgia. Instead, go investigate to see if there are national research innovation strategies, policies, and identify those which specifically say, oh, this field of STEM or social science is of importance to our country. Yeah. So that's on a national level. Then on an EU level, there's various ways you can do this. You demonstrate the importance. One is to go and have a look at the Horizon Europe programs, um, find out about current or past calls over the last 5 years that maybe were specifically relevant to your research topic. That's one way to demonstrate it. Another place to go and have a look is what they call the European partnerships. So with the start of Horizon Europe, the Commission helped set up these public-private organizations, what they called European partnerships. And I lose track now how many exist, but these are sort of basically groupings, yes, of public and private organizations focused on specific sort of challenges. There's one called Processes for Planet, Clean Hydrogen, Photonics, High Performance Computing, One Health, Antimicrobial Resistance. I've just listed here maybe 5 or 6, but there's probably 15 or 20 of them altogether. If you do a Google search on European partnerships, you can find a more comprehensive list. If you find one that's relevant to your field of research, go and have a look at the website and see if they have published some sort of strategic research agenda. And if they've done that, that can then be a reference point for saying, oh, the research topic I want to focus on in my 20 proposal, da 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 da, it's clearly referenced as a priority by the strategic research agenda of this European partnership. Yeah. We move on, still in section 1, but 1.2. So with all my 20 proposals, I asked the coordinating institution to produce a SWOT analysis. For those of you who don't know, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And these SWOT analyses are um, done as a sort of matrix table that you see here. So the way to sort of read these is, so if I'm looking at the left-hand column, you'll see it's got strengths in the top quadrant and then weaknesses in the lower quadrant. The way to fill this out is to identify the main strengths and weaknesses of your, say, research group, your university, your public research institute. Okay, so you're looking inwardly. You're trying to define these strengths and weaknesses as honestly, as candidly for your organization, your group. For the right-hand side where it says opportunities and threats, here you're taking a somewhat more outward-looking view. Yeah, the idea here is you're sort of saying, well, what opportunities and threats does say my research group, our research field of research have from the external environment? Opportunities, of course, could be things like certain economic developments, certain government funding programs, be it on a national or European level. Threats, on the other hand, might be things like struggle to get young researchers because they're attracted to industry, they see better salaries, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's very quickly, broadly, the idea with a SWOT analysis. Now, what I suggest you do if you're doing a 20 proposal, go sort of iteratively through creating this sort of matrix, and once you've and it'll end up being an iterative process, but once you've sort of created it, at some point you're going to write some text where, for all the strengths and weaknesses you've got listed here, somehow you're going to link those to your uh, research and innovation strategy for your 20 proposal. So all those 5 objectives we talked about earlier on for the proposal, somehow you're going to make a link to this SWOT, that you're going to sort of justify why you got these objectives, because somehow they address specific strengths, specific weaknesses from your SWOT. Another thing to consider. So this here I'm really thinking about sort of, if you like, STEM kind of focused twinning projects. Um, so your work package, we talked about the commission, you can have a work package one, it's an option, it's a research component, it needs to be somehow state of the art. Obviously, in your proposal, you're going to be writing some sort of qualitative description about what that work package one, what that project will be about. What I'm showing you here is a way to try to help convince the reviewers, the commission, that what you're doing is really state of the art. So in this case here, this table, this was from a Horizon Europe twinning proposal, which was related to organic electronics. And it was a sort of chemistry group from Cambridge University of Technology. And they were developing, with their project, they want to develop certain types of organic electronic materials that can be eventually used for things like lighting for computer displays. And what I got them to do was to create this table, and they're going to be developing different types of emitter, blue, green, red. And I said, okay, that's great. Capture in a table which a scientist from your field of research will be able to understand, it will be able to look at, and be able to quickly identify that, oh, the results you're trying to achieve for these materials, they really are state of the art. Yeah, so whatever field of science you're in, try to come up with some quantitative indicators, quantitative targets for that work package one, some way to demonstrate that you are being ambitious with your project. We move on now to the section 3 of the part B. So this is the implementation. So again, I'm not going to talk exhaustively. But what I like to highlight is a bit about some things to consider when you're doing your work package 2 and work package 3, the ones about the exchanges. I'll say some words about budget. Then section 3.2, capacity of participants and consortium as a whole. I'll say some words about the twinning network. In fact, I'll show you, I already showed you that sort of triangle figure, but I'll show you now a completed one. And I'll say some words about the Commission expects you to talk about the complementarity with respect to the project's objectives. I'll say some words about that. Okay, so first of all, um, assuming you write a twinning proposal where you structure it according to this sort of excellence implementation impact framework, and you have these 5 objectives, that's then basically objective 2 is about your exchanges of senior researchers, and objective 3 is about the training and exchanges of the young researchers. Okay, in this section 3 implementation, you're going to have to describe the work packages to help achieve those specific objectives. Now, when it comes to exchanges, um, this is the kind of thing what you see in this slide. This is, say, a task description from a work package in that section 3. So what I say to the consortia, to the coordinating organization and the advanced partners, look, um, for, for the exchanges from the coordinator, between the coordinator and say each of the advanced partners, for each of those have its separate task. So, one task dealing with, say, exchanges of senior researchers from the coordinating institution to advanced partner 1, and then another task, say task 2.2, showing about the exchanges from the coordinating institution to advanced partner 2. In this slide, you see a sort of task description between the coordinator and one of the advanced partners. And what I say is to the consortia, to the proposal writers, look, write as briefly as you can a description of what is going to be taught, what's going to be the knowledge exchange in year 1, year 2, year 3, and then please come up with a preliminary exchange schedule. So at the bottom of this, and by the way, all the names here are fictitious. Obviously, I had to replace the real names, but do your best to put down the names of real researchers from your institution and your advanced partners. And if you do that, it just helps to, I feel, give more credibility to your proposal. It shows that you really have a plan. That, when this project starts, bang, you have the intention to go ahead and do things. Now, of course, some of you might say, oh, but we're submitting this proposal, even if it's successful, it won't start for another year, year and a half from today. Okay, well, don't panic. With the wording that you add, I mean, you see it above the table, it says here the preliminary exchange. So that I've actually allowed a little bit of freedom there to say, it says implicitly, this might change, yeah, but at least this is our vision at the start. So that this is sort of task description in work package 2. It gives a kind of template as well for what you should do, say in work package 3 for the exchanges with the young researchers. Okay, move on now to section 3.2. So this sort of figure, earlier on you saw a blank version of this figure showing the network. This is a real example. This was from a twinning project that's currently running now called Quest, with ELTA, a university in Budapest in Hungary. So their twinning project is on this very sort of advanced field of physics, quantum reservoir computing. That's described in the yellow bubble in the middle. And then you see they essentially, in their consortium, they had 2 other universities. There's Linköping University in Sweden and Loughborough University in the UK. And you see how they complement one another. In their particular uh, consortium, my company was also involved. You see us in the top right, but obviously we're not a research partner. And at least to begin with, there was even an SME, a small to medium-sized enterprise called Just in Mind, who unfortunately subsequently went bankrupt. But anyway, for your proposals, I think um, be more than happy just to have, say, three partners, yourself and two advanced um, research slash university partners. Still a bit on this section 3.2. So right at the very, very end of the part B, the commission sort of asks you to sort of emphasize about the capabilities, contributions, and complementarity. What I do is I have a table, simple table like this, and I basically copy in the left-hand side, I copy and paste in the titles for each of the different objectives that I had from section 1.1. And then in the right-hand column, I try to write as concisely as possible evidence to demonstrate that, look, these partners, we are complementary. We do have the capabilities to achieve these objectives. So that's sort of section 3.2. Let me move on now to say some words about budget, which also features in section 3. So depending on the space you have available, and often space is a major constraint. But if you have enough space, it's quite nice to have some simple pie charts to illustrate aspects about your budget. So here on this slide, you see two pie charts. I'll start with the one on the left. So this was, I did a simple, and I should emphasize this, these examples here, this was from a twinning proposal from back in 2021. When we did it in 2021, we also had this constraint that the research component couldn't exceed 30%, but we were also told that the coordinating partner had to have at least 70%, not simply 50%, but at least 70% of this 30%. So in that pie chart there, very simply, you see the budgets that we had for work package one for the different partners. Obviously, if you do have space, a pie chart like that, showing that the coordinator has at least 50% and that the total amount doesn't exceed the 30%, that would be good. For the pie chart on the right, here I'm illustrating the number of person months for each of the work packages. Now, one particular work package I'd like to draw your attention to is work package 6. So work package 6 in my configuration is the one for project management. Now, the key thing, the absolutely vital thing you need to do here is the number of person months you allocate for project management should be somewhere between 5 to 7% of the total number of person months for the whole project. This, what I'm recommending here is I've never seen it ever written in any work program or any official document from the Commission. However, somehow this is understood as being quote unquote common knowledge, or I know in reality when you get these projects, they're very administratively, very bureaucratic to manage, and quite possibly in reality that you need to spend more person months than 7%. But please, in your proposals, make sure you stay between 5 to 7%. If you go below 5%, you risk being criticized for not allocating sufficient resources. On the other hand, if you go above 7%, you risk, rightly or wrongly, with being criticized for allocating too much resources. So between 5 and 7%, in other words, 6% is like the golden, let's say a golden number to use, yeah? Then for all the other work packages, the thing to do here is if there is any particular work package which has quite a lot of a resource, make sure you write some bullet points just to justify why it requires that additional resource. Okay, we move on to now to section to impact. So some of the things I want to talk about, again, it's not exhaustive. In section two, you have section 2.1 projects pathways towards impact. So I wanted to say some words about the contribution to expected outcomes in qualitative and quantitative measures. I want to say some words about potential barriers arising from factors beyond the scope and duration of the project. In section 2.2, which is entitled Dissemination, Exploitation and Communication, I want to show you part of an example of a dissemination and communication plan. I want to say some words about strategy for the management of intellectual property. And then in section 2.3, where you're required to give us a summary about impact pathways, I'm going to give you a very concrete example of some tables that I've used in twinning proposals. So firstly, so this section 2.1, sort of contribution to the expected impacts. On this slide, you see these 5 outcomes. I've literally copied and pasted these from the Twinning call text in the Widening work program. And what I recommend you do is in your section 2.1, put each of these outcomes in there, literally copy the text, put it in there. Then underneath each of the outcomes, write as concretely, let's say, as possible, how your project will help contribute to those. And this, if you like, this qualitative justification description altogether, aim for about 2 pages. So that's very briefly saying about the qualitative part. Also think about the quantitative way in which your project will be helping to lead to those expected outcomes. So, and the way you can go about doing that is by having a table, simple table like this. So in the left-hand side, in the column, I've literally copied and pasted the different outcomes the commission is expected. I then briefly wrote the work packages somehow will be contributing to those outcomes. And then in the third column, I've sort of defined performance indicators. And to be honest, these outcomes, the expected outcomes that the commission is expecting, quite a number of the performance indicators that you will define, they'll be relevant for several outcomes. So don't be worried, especially things like if you have performance indicators about the publication of joint research papers, these are relevant to several outcomes. Don't be worried that you're repeating some of these indicators again. Yeah. So you have your indicators, titles of them, and then in the last column, target, try to come up with some realistic targets that you can achieve by the end of the project for those. Still in section 2.1, the Commission expects you to write about scientific related barriers. So here, they expect you to write about barriers. Now, my recommendation is that you write about 2 sorts of barriers. Firstly, about scientific related barriers specific to your field of research. So here, describe 3 to 4 challenges, barriers specific to the research topic, or describe 3 to 4 challenges / barriers identified by relevant European partnerships. So in an earlier slide, I talked about European partnerships, and I said, look, go and have a look for their strategic research agendas. If you can find a strategic research agenda for a European partnership, buried in that document, for sure, it will write about challenges and barriers in that field. And those are good references to use in this section. So write about the scientific related barriers, but also write about the country related barriers. So specific to Georgia, there'll no doubt be certain challenges, barriers faced by your country's research and innovation system. So write briefly about those and make sure you reference some relevant documents. With all these barriers, it's scientific or country. Don't only relate, of course, you need to describe briefly these challenges and barriers, but also make sure that you describe some sort of mitigation measure that your project can take to address them. Okay, we move on to um, another part of section two, where you have to provide a dissemination and communication plan. So this slide, on this slide here, you see, I couldn't fit it all on one slide, but you see probably something like 60, 70% of a dissemination and communication plan table. These sorts of dissemination communication plans are common to all, you see them in all Horizon Europe proposals. And this one here, this is from a twinning proposal from a few years ago. So this is the kind of thing that you should also include in your section two. Obviously, the types of indicators and the targets, adjust them to fit your circumstances. If your twinning proposal is focused on the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics kind of topic, which may lead to, say, potential patents, certainly to publications. Another good thing to include in section two is a bit about your strategy for managing intellectual property. So what I do here is I have these two sort of tables. One says background knowledge, the other one says possible foreground knowledge. So background knowledge is the knowledge that partners have prior to the project. It's specific knowledge. In this case, this table is done regarding OLEDs, organic light emitting diodes. I told the partners there to each identify specific knowledge that their institute has. At the same time, though, I also said, well, look, if we get this project and we implement the twinning project and this work package one with this research component, that's going to lead to new knowledge. You're going to do these scientific experiments, you'll get results, you'll do publications, there'll be new knowledge, what's called foreground knowledge. So I said, look, please make some speculation what the new knowledge might be, and please put it in this table and identify if you're the main partner responsible for it, or if there'll be other partners in the consortium that might have some sort of ownership rights. By doing this and having this already in your section two of your proposal, you're very clearly showing to the evaluators, the reviewers, that you have an awareness about the intellectual property that might come out of your project. So have these tables, but then underneath or before the tables, have some text where you say, look, you basically explain briefly what the strategy is with regard to uh, filing patents, disclosure, ownership rights across the partners. Also in this impact section, you in this sort of last section of section 2.3, you're asked to sort of provide a summary and about describing what they call impact pathways. Now, in buried in the standard application form for coordination support actions like twinning, buried in that standard application form, there are some tables that the Commission says you need to have in section 2.3 and you need to fill out. What I'm showing you here is a real example. This is how, so the Commission has sort of two tables with headings like specific needs, expected results, dissemination, exploitation, communication measures, etc. This is a real example. This is how I filled it out for a twinning proposal with ELTA on quantum reservoir computing. The challenge I faced with this proposal, indeed with all twinning proposals, was the page constraints, the limit on space. So with this, when you see this table in that standard application form, I think the Commission has it filling out a whole page. I end up managing to squeeze the two tables into about sort of half a page, less than half a page of A4. But the only way I could do that was by, having it very concise. As you see in some of the sections, for example, where it says expected results and outcomes, I didn't even bother trying to sort of write text. I just said, please go and see see section 2.1.2 or section 1.1 or whatever it was elsewhere in the proposal. This was my way to try to tackle the issue of space constraints. What else to mention about this table? Yeah, maybe just to say where it says specific needs. So the idea here is what's the specific, the commission is saying, what's the specific need that's driving you to apply for this twinning call? And I would suggest, uh, think of it, try to come up with justifications on two levels. First of all, talk about, say, your specific need and remember the SWOT analysis that you did. Yeah. So your SWOT analysis, you're saying this identified threats, weaknesses that need to be addressed, and that's why you're applying for this twinning proposal. That's on your specific need. But then also step back and try to think, well, what are there any EU needs? Are there any EU policies or documents? And in our case, this proposal was all about quantum reservoir computing. Quantum technology is a sort of rather hot topic for the Commission these days. So we made reference here to a specific strategic research agenda on quantum technologies from the European Commission. And we said that was also a need that we would be addressing by having our twinning proposal. Obviously, this type of table you need to adapt for your own, depending on the research topic, you need to adapt it accordingly. Okay, enough about part B. Let's move on to the part A. So the whole part A involves you entering data. Once you've registered for the call on the European Commission's Funding and Tenders portal, the part A is where you fill in data into online forms. So when you're doing that, make sure that you check that you have the right, indicate the right call topic, acronym, title, and duration. They're all correctly encoded. There's a part with the part A where you get to select scientific descriptors from some pulled down lists. Make sure you do your best to identify the ones most relevant to your field of research. Ensure that the participant data, so the data for your organization and your advanced partners is correct. They each have what's called participant identification codes or PICs. They need to be right. The legal statuses are up to date. Make sure you get all the names of the researchers from your organization and your twinning partners, their ORCID numbers, their email addresses. This is all information you'll need to encode into the part A. And yeah, any information that you have put into the part A, like the summary, the information about the partners, make sure it's all consistent with the part B. So there is, in this part A, there is an abstract. It's around 200 words. This abstract is quite often the first bit of text that an evaluator will read, so it needs to be really well written. Make sure that your abstract gets read by a native English speaker or somebody very, very proficient in English, so that the text reads very smoothly and nicely. But in this abstract, what would you mention? I would say, well, mention what the overall goal is in terms of trying to boost the scientific prowess and innovation capabilities of your organization in whatever research topic. Mention your excellent twinning partners. Say some words about the project's key objectives and the project's expected impacts. Also in this part A is where you're going to upload your lump sum budget. Now, I have to be honest, I don't have, unfortunately, really the time to go into detail about lump sum budgets. What I instead would like to do is to refer you to a European Commission website where they give an overview and they give training about how to do lump sum budgets. So what you see on this slide, that's it shows a screenshot of the landing page, the web page where the Commission described lump sum budget. The QR code on the left will take you directly there. There's just training videos, training presentations. Um, the little I will say about one or two points I will sort of say about this lump sum budget. So make sure you have the latest version, and you'll do that by downloading the version once you've registered for the twinning call. Once you have, and with this lump sum budget tool, what it requires you to do is to put in the budget for each of the partners for each of their work packages. So in the end, you end up with lump sums of budget for each partner for each work package. One word of advice I will give you about the lump sum budget, which I don't think is necessarily covered by their training videos, and that is there is something called the Horizon dashboard for lump sum evaluations. So the thing to understand and be aware of is the bulk of your budget for twinning and indeed for most Horizon Europe projects is allocated for personnel costs. So since that's the case, it's important that evaluators have some sort of idea uh, about what represents what the range of person month costs are for different research organizations from different countries. So what the Commission have done is they set up this Horizon dashboard for lump sum evaluations. It was set up, in fact, for the evaluators. And the QR code in the top left will take you directly to that web page. And when you get to that web page, you can specify what country you're interested in. It could be Luxembourg, it could be Georgia. You can specify what type of organization that you're interested in. It might be a public research organization, university, private company, whatever. Once you've put in the country, the type of organization, the web page then spits back with information about what are the 20th, 50th, and 80th percentile uh, figures for the person month rate for that type of organization in that country. And these figures are based on what the Commission has seen from past Horizon Europe proposals. So why am I saying all this? Well, if you're the coordinator preparing a proposal and you're dealing with your advanced partners, it's vital that you have some awareness about how their person month rates compare to the normal, yeah, how they compare to the median. If their figures are their person month rates for their type of organization in their country are somewhere between the 20th and 80th percentile, then all fine and good, nothing to worry about. If, on the other hand, they're below the 20th percentile, or more likely above the 80th percentile, this is not a disaster. But what I would say is especially if it's above the 80th percentile, make sure you write some short sentence somewhere where the budget's presented or in one of the sheets in that lump sum Excel budget tool. Make sure you write some short justification. And usually the justification might be something like saying, oh, look, person month rates are above the 80th percentile because this project involves a lot of senior researchers. And we need senior researchers because it's a particularly advanced, if you like, field of research or activity that they're working on. If you include such a short justification, it just avoids the risk that you might get criticized for high personnel costs. Okay, what else do we have lastly in the party? There's an ethics assessment. Obvious statements here, make sure you fill out carefully and address any issues raised in your activities. You, I guess for projects, twinning projects where it's dealing with sort of healthcare, medical, this is where you're most likely to trigger some sort of ethics, and you need to make sure you have the right mitigation measures in place. What else? Oh, we move on. Okay, so fortunately, the last sort of part of this presentation, I just want to direct you towards other sources of information. So first and foremost, the thing to be aware of is the European Commission is going to have an info day, an online info day about the latest widening course, including twinning. This is going to take place on the 22nd of January, starting at 10 o'clock Brussels time. The QR code on the right hand side, that will take you directly to the website where you can register for this. So this is a free event. If you're interested in Twinning Call, I highly recommend you attend it. If for some reason you cannot, the Commission usually publishes a few days after the event on YouTube videos from the info day. So don't worry if you can't attend it, but at the very least, whether in real time or subsequently, make sure you go and listen to what they say. They're expecting how they see the twinning call and what they're expecting to see from twinning proposals. Um, Indeed, if you're super keen, well, I'm showing this slide. This was actually so when we had the 2023 twinning call, the Commission also had an info day. They also published YouTube videos about those. If Because the twinning calls don't really change too much from one call to the next. There's quite often relevant information from previous calls. So if you're feeling really keen, this is where you can find out about the YouTube video from the 2023 call. The QR code will take you there. Another very important source of information for twinning. So I showed you already much earlier on in the presentation. I gave a QR code where you could go to the European Commission's funding and tenders webpage to register for the twinning call. Assuming you've registered, you'll see a page, something rather like this. This is actually the webpage when we had the 2021 call, but the screenshot would look very similar. The thing to do is to look on the left-hand side. And what I've highlighted here in red, it says topic-related FAQs, so frequently asked questions. Go and have a look there because, and in fact, I only yesterday I myself registered just out of interest for the latest twinning call, and I see there's already a lot of FAQs. A lot of organisations are asking questions, and what the Commission does is they publish their answers and they make them public so everybody can see them. So this is another good source of information uh, about the call. Likewise, on that same, if you like, web page, um, lower down on the menu, you see it says funded project list. Now, and I gave in an earlier slide, right near the beginning where I sort of said example twinning projects. Here, it's a very good idea to go and investigate about past funded projects and seeing how they've done. Yeah. Then the last sort of recommendation about other sources of information. So there's something called the NCP Wide Era Network. This is the website here, www.ncpwideera.net. This is a network of national contact points dedicated to the widening program. So, including Georgia has a national contact point. This is a person who's been appointed who you can get in contact with to get additional information about the widening calls. I recommend that you go to this website. Via the website, you can register for their free e-newsletters. And these newsletters get published every 1 or 2 months, and they provide a lot of useful background information about the widening course, including twinning and about info days. Also, what's very, very interesting is this NCP Wide Era Net. They've also set up 1 or 2 years ago a free expert pre-screening facility for Horizon Europe proposals. So in other words, if you do it early enough, you can send a draft, an advanced draft of your twinning proposal to them, and they will give you critical feedback. Okay, so